Hey guys, you are listening to the Unruly Doctor podcast, a podcast about life, metaphysics, current events, politics, and anything I find interesting. Please subscribe to our channel and like this episode so that we can grow and reach a bigger audience. Enjoy the episode. All right, guys, here it comes. I think we're releasing this episode here on the first day of the new year. So what's up? This is Dr. Bain. Let my awesome intro roll. Here it comes. Take a sippy. Shout out to Truly. So happy New Year, guys. It's Dr. Bain here, Unruly Doctor podcast. I think we're on episode 8 now. So podcast is really rolling out, and I've been listening to your guys' feedback, and I've been really enjoying the conversations we've been having and listening to everybody's feedback. I've actually been so amazed how many people are starting to find this podcast. Gosh, I'm so prepubescent. Stop doing that all the time. How many people find this podcast and who actually have been like loyally listening to it. So if you're listening to the podcast, man, thank you so much. This has been a labor of love, a lot of investment financially and time-wise, and I try to do as best of work that I can as I apparently, once again, I'm turning 14 at the moment. So I thought I'd start off today's podcast. Really, I just, and here's the thing. This podcast is always going to be an open forum. It's always just going to be me kind of getting my, thoughts out there of, what do I think about, with what's going on in the world, what, different health topics and things like that. So I think today's episode, I really wanted to focus a lot on how much time do we actually spend trying to improve ourselves. And I don't mean in the superficial way, because that's the way that I think, especially during this time of year, right? Like we're around New Year's time. And around New Year's time is just when most people decide to make a change for the positive, right? So I'm releasing this video on the first day of January 2022, right? And a lot of people are going to go out right now and they're going to sign up for a gym membership somewhere. They'll go hit up EOS. I'm so sick of my voice doing that. Why do I do that? They're going to hit up EOS, or they're going to hit up, LA Fitness, or they're going to do, whatever it is. And, they're thinking of superficial improvement, body oriented improvement, kind of like superficial things, hey, I want to lose weight. I want to, this year I want to make a bunch of money. I want to go on this trip. And not that any of those things are like a bad thing. I think those things are, obviously those are all great things. I mean, if it takes New Year's for you to actually start doing the things that you've always wanted to do, I'm glad that that's happened for you. But, the conversation I want to have with you right now is that there is no perfect time to do the things that you want or need to do in your life. You don't have to wait for a New Year's resolution in order to decide that you want to be better in some way. And, once again, these superficial things are okay. These are good, right? Like, once again, getting your health right. Well, of course, I want to encourage you guys to do that, right? There's plenty of people who are either getting exposed to my videos or podcast who know that their body is not in that great of health, and they know that, for example, like Sean or I at my clinic could probably make them a much healthier person, but they're always putting us off to the side, right? They're always putting us kind of on a back burner, right? Well, I'll do it in, 3 months from now, 1 month from now, and if you're listening to this podcast and you're if you're very sick, if you've got a lot of, chronic symptoms and, a lot of pain, or maybe you've got this weird vertigo thing, or maybe you're tired all the time, or, whatever it might be, you've got this undiagnosed set of symptoms that no one can seem to figure out. A lot of people put that on the back burner until kind of a short-term booster like New Year's. But what I want to encourage people to do is, I think as people, we need to spend a lot more time working on ourselves internally all the time. Not just using, a holiday as an excuse in order to make a change, because that's a superficial change. That's not a deep-seated change coming from deep motivations. It's almost kind of like you feel like you have to do it because everybody else is doing that. It's the bandwagon thing. I think every day we should be looking at ourselves, evaluating ourselves in some way and saying, how could I have improved myself today? And a lot of that really is in a mindset. I think a lot of it actually has to do with rewiring your brain. And I've been working on this pretty hard for the last couple of years, because kind of like I talked about in one of the past episodes, shout out to the episode where I was talking about power of words and thoughts and things like that. That if you haven't listened to that episode, you really should listen to that episode of the podcast, because it really is accurate to how we need to actually rewire our brain by every day evaluating our actions and trying to improve ourselves every single day. And a lot of that reason is the way I look at it. We all have that scenario where we have a friend or a family member or someone like that, and it doesn't take long, right? One event can completely change the trajectory of anybody's life. I could go walk out my door tonight, get in my car, drive 5 minutes, and boom, I get hit by a drunk driver or something, right? And then boom, that life is over. Now, if you've listened to my previous podcast, I'm a firm believer in reincarnation in multiple lifetimes. So if that does happen to you or a loved one or friend or, whatever it may be, I have full confidence. It's a very sad event, but they have other lifetimes to live. This isn't the only one they're getting anyway, so we can kind of take some comfort in knowing that, this is one of many. But still, you want to utilize each lifetime maximally. Why? Well, if you have the choice to reincarnate 100 times versus 80 times, I think a lot of us have experienced a lot of life traumas, and it would probably be worth it to, axe an extra 20 lifetimes of more traumas to learn certain lessons, right? I think we'd all agree. Now, some people have totally a lifetime in this, version where they don't have anything happen to them negative, and that's totally cool. Like, I totally fully support you if that's the case, right? And you'd be like, oh, I'd love to live 100 lifetimes like this, right? But I think that's one of the cruxes of the human, what do you want to call it? Not the mind, but the, well, you could call it the human mind, where we tend to have this tendency to get very comfortable in kind of our way that we're functioning in our life. And so then we don't really spend a lot of time on developing ourselves deeply. There's plenty of, like, if you go on TikTok, for example, and this is like number one pet peeve of mine, I just can't stand it, where every time I go on TikTok, it's just like so many entrepreneur videos. How many times you got to see that, you got to hustle meme? I'm like type of thing like that. Like, you got to hustle. You got to have that mindset. That's a superficial mindset. A lot of times you meet those people and they're good at one thing sometimes, right? Not always, because a lot of them are fake, right? But some of them are good at one thing. They're good at making money, okay? That's a skill set. That's a skill. That's not a development of your character. Now, some aspects of it, you could probably argue that it's a development of your character, right? Like hard work, dedication, goal setting, sacrifice. Like, those are all great lessons. I'm not arguing that. I've had to learn all those lessons in my entrepreneurship, right? But a lot of times we're just not thinking, in my opinion, about deeper development the way that I think we should. I think, every day, if you're one of my patients and stuff like that, a lot of my patients know that when they're coming into the clinic and they don't have the right attitude, a lot of times I will annoyingly stop you and I will say, can you please change the mindset? Not only because I don't want to carry your energy home with me, and it kind of, I don't love the toxicity as I've gotten older and I've gotten much deeper into energy and, metaphysics and things like that. I really don't enjoy negativity. I try to stay away from it as literally as physically as much as possible. But it also will stifle people's development. People tend to spend so much time and energy on the day-to-day, just surviving 9 to 5, that a lot of times they're missing, big components of, what this life is really about. And of course, each lifetime is a different set of goals that I believe you set for yourself before you come here, along with a board of advisors. So one of these times I'll make a podcast episode where I'll just even talk about that. I'll just talk about a lot of the books I've read from people who've died and hypnotists and things. I've read a lot of books where people have explored the other side as deeply as I think you can while you're here. And they've discovered a lot of cool things. Life is way more complex than we're even giving it partial credit for. So, as you're listening to this on your New Year's, January 1st, 2022, as you're listening to this, watching this on YouTube or Facebook, wherever I'm posting this, I highly encourage you to take a look at yourself, take a look at your life, take a look at where you're going. Think about your long-term goals. Don't just think about your short-term, I want to satisfy this thing temporarily goals. Okay. It's still a great thing. If you've been struggling with weight or you've been struggling with something like that, every day is the time. I can't stress that enough. And that's one of the things I've told every patient who kind of, you'll be surprised how many people you'll meet who want to start a small business or something. And when people see that there's a small business that's succeeding, which is not easy, by the way, half of all small businesses fail within the first year. So, when you see a small business that's succeeding, a lot of people want to know, how did you do it? What's the process? What's the this? What's the that? And what I always tell people who've asked me that before, who are considering opening a small business or trying to do an entrepreneurial adventure, I always tell them the same thing, man. Every day is the first day to start. There is no perfect time for literally anything. And that's something I've told so many people that it's almost a headache. You know what I mean? Or it's like I've told so many people that, patients, other people in my life, it's worth starting at any moment. And to start, you can just start thinking. Literally, a thought is a beginning. Right? Like, for example, if I'm trying to figure out, okay, I want to open a small business. Okay, number one, think about what would you want to open? What would you want to do? What are your thoughts? Right? I was kind of thinking about this in the car the other day. I was like, if I was going to start a different business, like what would I start as a different business? And I always start kind of like when I did for the concept for my clinic and my future plans of doing public speaking and private consulting. That's next on the docket. Believe it or not, not like I'm doing enough already between a podcast, regular YouTube videos, the clinic, right? Like my life isn't already, multifaceted enough, but I just need to keep pushing, right? And I'm actually doing I'm actually a keynote speaker in an upcoming conference here, a women's health conference, at the end of January. So, hey, if anybody's out there listening right now and you want to come, live and watch me be a keynote speaker amongst a bunch of other people at a women's health conference, hit me up. I'll be there. But you can literally just start with a thought. And in terms of like opening a small business, right? What do you love in your life? And I think that's something, we don't think about enough. We don't ask that question enough. What do I love? Okay, you love your dog. You love your spouse. You love your house. You love your kids. Okay, I would agree. I think most people in those scenarios do, right? But in terms of what do you love to do then? Say I love to hunt and fish. Okay, cool. That's what you love to do. Okay, once you know what you love to do, then you got to think, well, how do you turn that into a business? How can you make money doing what I love, where someone else will be convinced of the value that I'm providing, where they'll pay for whatever that I do in that category, right? Now, in that scenario, maybe you start a hunting and fishing podcast. Maybe you start a hunting and fishing YouTube channel, right? Tough market, no doubt that's a very tough market, right? But maybe instead of that, maybe you're doing, customized hunting gear. Okay, still a tough market, but I could see the potential where that's probably a better idea. Or maybe you want to open up a small business hunting and fishing store, and so you're building these ideas, right? And I know how we kind of went from, goal setting and things like that and health and into this. But I think the transition, albeit a little shaky, is actually very relevant, because this might be, some people who are listening to this might be thinking about this as a potential thing, because ultimately, with all the podcasts I've been having lately where we're talking about kind of where I think the world is going, unfortunately, where the governments and big businesses are going to continue trying to suck everybody up and essentially, take away your land, take away your property, take away your livings, right? Fire you off the job, or you know what I mean? Because you'll be totally expendable if you work for a big corporation. I can promise you that. If you're working for a big corporation right now, and you've still got a long time to live before retirement, I can tell you right now, in the next decade, your job is going to be at stake for sure. And you may very well have to find a way to make money outside of a large business. So there's going to be a lot of small business owners in the very near future. It's just a personal opinion. Or at least they're going to try, because they're going to have to try, because you're going to be such in financial straits because of the way that the world is going to be designed in the next decade, that the only way that you'll be able to make a decent living, I believe, in the next 10 to 20 years is going to be owning your own gig, where, you pay me for what I got, I pay you for what you got, we both pay each other well, and then we can both live happily, right? That's going to be kind of the only way that I think we're going to maintain middle class to upper middle class society. That's to me, that's the only way, as the government keeps expanding, and unfortunately it's going that way, right? So you also got to think about, in this example, right, if you're opening a small business or something similar, you also once you have what you love and some type of idea of why people would pay you and make a profit for whatever it is. The next step after that is uniqueness. This is the number one thing whenever I think about why my practice has done well in a short amount of time. The number one reason I attribute to my practice is uniqueness, difference, standing out. That is the number one reason why we've done things that most places can't do in a short amount of time. So in this example, right, if you're, hunting and fishing is your thing, you're opening up a hunting and fishing store maybe where you're selling hunting and fishing gear, you need to then stick out from the big boys, because your big boys are Cabela's and Bass Pro Shop. Walmart's got a huge hunting and fishing section who are always going to be cheaper than you, guaranteed. So then you got to think about, what is a niche thing or a unique thing that will make me stand out from everybody else in this category? And guys, if I was a hunter and fisher, I could probably tell you what that is. I don't specifically know at the moment, but one idea that pops into my head immediately is like, maybe you have a very high-end hunting and fishing store. You only carry the highest quality stuff, period. You've got the best. You've got every unique and beautiful fishing reel, right? Or I don't know, you've only got the most incredible looking shotguns that all have like intricate, ornate, custom carvings on them. You only have the highest quality duck calls, or turkey calls. I don't know. That's just an idea, right? But you see where I'm going with that in terms of this analogy here, this idea where, if that was me, that's what I would do in that category. But of course, I'm always been prone to trying to be on the high end of a category, right? So that's how I designed my clinic. I never wanted to be Chuck E. Cheese. I never wanted to be McDonald's, right? Every patient knows my typical joke that I constantly make, and that is, when you go out for a meal, which one of the meals are you going to remember? The one time you went to a steakhouse and you had an incredible meal with you and your spouse, you dressed up, you had wine, you had a great meal, you had dessert. It was just the best steak you ever had. Or do you remember one of any of the millions of times that you went to Mickey D's, right? The $1 cheeseburger. You don't remember a single time you go to Mickey D's. But everybody remembers a special moment and the year and the day when their spouse took them to an incredible steakhouse for, an anniversary or something. So that's always try to imagine my business is, I want my business to be in that category. I want to be the steakhouse. I don't want to be Mickey D's. And that's just the several different ways that I think you can look at business design. And this is, maybe you could put it in 3 categories, I guess, if we're talking in pricing and feel and vibe and design and flow would be, number 1, you can be cheap. You can be cheapy. You can undercut everybody else, right? So that's number 1. That's McDonald's, right? Or in my field, that would be the Joint Chiropractic, right? You can undercut everybody else. You can lower quality to as low as possible, which lowers pricing, and then you lower quality, all the standards, time, all that stuff. Cheapy, and there's a group of people who will take that every day of the week. Now, is that going to give them great health? Nope. But some people don't care about that, right? Just like a lot of people will eat at McDonald's all the time because it's cheap. They don't really care about their health. Tastes good enough. Okay, cool, boom. That's the McDonald's crew. Then there's the middle crew, right? Middle of the road where it's not super cheapy. It's not high end, but it's comfortable. It's middle of the road, right? It's a pair of jeans, right? Like it's a pair of jeans. Everybody wears jeans every day. Why do we wear them every day? It's an everyday clothing item. It's comfortable, but yet, you could wear it to work. I wear jeans all the time to work, right? You can wear it to work and people won't judge you, right? So that's jeans, right? So pricing wise, you're going to be right on the middle road there. Your quality's middle road. And there's a large sum of people who will want to hit the middle road, right? Or if you're like a grocery store, that would be like hitting Albertsons, right? You can go to Walmart, which is cheapy. You can go to Albertsons in the middle right there, middle game. Or, whatever it is. I can't, I lived in several states, so I think there's Albertsons here in Arizona. I'm pretty sure. I think there's ones down the road from me. And then the third category, right, is what we just talked about, where specifically in my life, that's where I try to go for. And it's the hardest category for sure, but it does definitely benefit with a uniqueness, which is high-end category. And high-end category is typically the most expensive, takes the most time. They will take, whoever the business is will take the most time per person in that business. They will provide the highest level of service of all 3 categories. And if we're going back to the example of like our grocery stores for a second here, that'd be like the Hy-Vees. If you've ever been a Hy-Vee, man, that's a high-end grocery store. Or a Gelson's, or, what's that? Whole Foods. Whole Foods, that's a high-end category, right? You're going to pay more for higher quality, a higher quality experience, right? And there's a category for that group as well. And that's probably also one of the smaller categories. Now, the thing is, no matter which category you're in terms of your life and business or whatever it is you're doing, you can pull from any of the other categories sometimes, sometimes. And then that's probably the hardest thing to do, right? So if I'm in a high-end category, very difficult to pull somebody from the lowest category, right? It's really hard to get a McDonald's customer to want to come to my steakhouse. Very difficult, right? Just like it would be very difficult, though, for McDonald's for someone who's eating steak all the time, really hard to convince somebody to come get a double bacon cheese, right? Because they love steak, they love high-end food, right? Really hard to pull that person in. Person in the middle, though, they bounce between. Sometimes they're going to Mickey D's, sometimes they're shopping at Albertsons, sometimes they're shopping at Hy-Vee, depending on the event of the day, right? And so and in terms of if you're out there right now and you're looking for kind of a little snippet of small business advice, because I do think this is going to be very relevant. So because a lot of you right now are working for somebody else, okay, and that's not a bad thing. But what I am going to tell you is very soon, mark my words on this podcast right now. Make a mental note, because you're going to want to come back to this in years to come. I am calling it right now that in a decade to 2 decades, the only way to make a good living, where you could own property, have a house, have a nice car, doesn't have to be a great car, just a decent car, go on vacations, do any of that stuff, with also being able to have enough money being implemented into investments and savings, will only be for people who own a successful small business. That just mark my words, that is where the trend is going. So even if you don't own a small business right now and you don't think you need to own a small business right now, I am asking you to just take my advice for just a moment and have a plan for some type of potential small business in the next decade. I am telling you, I am fully convinced that this is what is going to happen because of what our government is doing with its overreach, with the hyperinflation, right? Right now is a time where for many people, it is becoming unaffordable just to afford things that they were able to afford no less than 6 months ago, right? Just filled up with gas. Crazy. That was the most. I visited my dad in California recently, and I filled up with a tank of gas in California. Okay, dude, it was almost $6 a gallon in Palm Springs. What is going on? That is insane. I've never paid that much in gas in my entire life. Okay, and thank God that I'm at least a comfortable middle-class individual where I can afford that increase, but there are a lot of people who can't. And most of those people who can't are people who work for somebody else because they aren't able to pay themselves enough. So, just giving everybody some advice and a warning of where I actually believe the future is truly going, and it is not going into a beautiful place, unfortunately, until we take our lives back from the government. But I digress on that. But in the same terms where we're talking about these 3 categories, I think we can look at ourselves like that too. I think if you actually think about it for a second, of all the people you've ever met in your life, and I know that's a really difficult choice, or a really difficult thought, right? I think if you really think about it, people fall into these categories in a lot of ways. And they do it to themselves. That's the really crazy thing. The really crazy thing is that their mindset, their life, their goals will truly match these 3 categories of the low, the middle, and the high. So let's think about it, right? In this low category, right, earlier we were talking about in the Mickey D's, right? Cheap, convenient, easy, the least amount of work, right? The least amount of care involved. That's what McDonald's, it's like, just put that, ba-da-da-da-da. Cheap, easy, affordable, right? You could call that Mickey. That's the new Mickey D's slogan, right? Hopefully Mickey D. Shout out to Mickey D's, and hopefully they don't. Hopefully they don't get mad at me, right? But a lot of people treat their life in that category, the Mickey D's style category, right? Bare minimum. Everything in their life is bare minimum, right? Just doing exactly what I got to do to survive. Not striving for anything more, not striving for anything less. I'm just going to make it. Just going to stay alive today. Not even going to think about tomorrow. I would never even think about starting my own business, right? In this category. I would never even think about how do I self-develop myself to be a better person and make myself progress and be better. Not even thinking about that in that category of person. So think about it right now. And in your life currently, at this moment, at this minute, try to think about who in your life fits in this category. And then what I want you to do is also think about what category you think you're in. How do you perceive yourself? Do you perceive yourself as in the low end, right? Do you perceive yourself in the Mickey D's category? Do you perceive yourself and your actions and your development in the middle category, middle of the road? Or do you consider yourself in the high end category, right? And there's no judgment, whichever one you think you're in. I'm not judging the lower category. I'm not. But there's no reason that if we're looking at ourselves, honestly, that we have to stay in these categories. We can develop ourselves to be better and further. I'm not the guru, okay? By far, anybody who's known me in the past, though, who would have looked at me a decade ago, who knew me a decade ago, and would look at me now, would find two very different people. Very different people. Not even a difficult argument to have, debate. So in terms of that lower category, right, if you evaluate yourself or the people that are surrounding you, especially, right, if you think you're in one of these upper categories of development, but your entire life is surrounded by only people who you would consider in a lower category of development, why would you spend all your time there? Why would you have a spouse, friends, coworkers who aren't on the same page as you in terms of where do you really want to see yourself? You get what I'm saying? Like if we go back to the example of like the New Year's resolution, right? Don't you want to surround yourself with people who have true, deep New Year's resolutions, who are serious, who lift you up, pick you up, make you better? Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people are surrounding themselves with people who are genuinely out for your best interest and development. I really don't. Seriously. I mean, how many people have you ever met where they have and some of you who are listening to this are probably, you might be this person. So don't take offense. This isn't me ripping on you, okay? But you might be or know somebody who's one of these folks who has ridiculous loads of who they call friends, right? They got 4,000, 3,000 people, friends on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. They go out to events. They know everybody. There's a million people they know. But at the end of the day, do you think if a serious situation happened to that person, do we think 3,000 people are showing up to the hospital? I've gone over this analogy before, but I think we all know the answer to that. There's no way. If anything, 2. I guarantee you 2 or 3, maybe, out of that entire gigantic stash of people. Everybody else is transient. It's non-developmental. It's a filler. It's a space filler. They fill a space or a void in time. I don't know how else to describe it like that, other than that. And maybe I'm wrong. Okay, you can always challenge me. You can always leave a comment, challenge me up for that. And we can have a peaceful debate about that. But I think most people would agree the true truth, the real trust happens in a very small group of people. So once again, there's the lower category. Okay, then we go back to our middle category, right? And the middle category is there's some self-development. There is some goals, some motivation, right? They want to have a house one day. They want to, they want to have kids. They want to kind of slowly climb their ladder of their corporate business that they work for. They want to slowly work their way up in corporate. They've got kind of just average, middle of the road. And once again, there's nothing wrong with whatever category that you are in or people around you are in. There's nothing wrong with that. the world would not be as interesting and diverse if we all were at the highest level of development, because if we were all at the highest level of development, you wouldn't be here. That includes me too, by the way. If I was at the highest level of spiritual, metaphysical development, I wouldn't have had to come here again if I had dotted all the T's and I's yet. I haven't. Nope. I think I'm close. That's not to be narcissistic or anything like that. That would be super narcissistic if that was like a full belief system. But like my astrologer, and there's other reasons why I think I'm pretty close. I don't think I have that many more reincarnations left. I'm actually crossing my fingers this is the last one. But, hey, that's not me being sad about being alive. Okay, don't take that weird. Don't call one of those hotlines or something. Okay, it's like that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, okay, that's our middle category of folks and how they look at life and how they perceive themselves, and probably the people who they surround themselves with. Very middle of the road. These people that they surround themselves with don't really bring you up. They don't technically always bring you down. Sometimes they do. But sometimes they also bring you up, right? But they kind of just keep you floating right where you're at. And I don't think a lot of people just want to float where they're at. Some do. Right. But that's because, once again, they just haven't really awoken yet. And this just probably isn't the lifetime for them to do that. This ain't it yet. And I think that's kind of fairly obvious in terms of the way the current world is working right now. A lot of people are really sitting in that middle to low category. Because that's why when people like myself or others who are probably listening to my podcast, right, we're pulling our hair out because we're all screaming from the rooftops like, don't you see what's really going on right now, right? And most people are totally zonked out. They're totally dead asleep, right? So then we're sitting here trying to wake them up and shaking them, right? Like, oh my God, don't you see what's really the bigger plan that's happening here? And some people are just like, oh, you're crazy, you're whatever, right? So that's because they're still asleep in the lower categories. And once you kind of like awaken, it's not the right term. I mean, it's a term, I guess. It's as close as I can think of, right? Because I don't know if there's really such a thing as enlightenment. I think enlightenment's kind of just a real over-exaggeration of just kind of being much more awake to possibilities of what this really is. But, so in terms of the middle category, these are the people that I think have the most potential to move up, because the people in the middle category are not totally closed off to the idea of change. They just need to be convinced. So if you're surrounding in your life by people who are in that category, or you think that you're in that category yourself, take the time after listening to this to really think about yourself. Think about, how do I think about other people? How do I think about myself? What do I spend my time doing in my spare time? And don't be judgmental of yourself. That's all I'm saying. Don't judge yourself harshly and, feel bad or something. That's not where we're going with this. But just take a real good, hard look at evaluating your life and you ask yourself truly, am I spending the time where I want to spend it? Am I doing the things that I really want to do? Am I accomplishing the goals I really want to achieve? Am I living my dreams? And if you're not, if the answer is no to a lot of those categories, you're probably in the average person. That's not uncommon. I think that's ridiculously common. And I think part of my goals in a lot of what I'm doing with this show and a lot of my pursuits now and in the future is really just to pull up more people. I think that's why I'm here, honestly, guys. I think I'm honestly here to pull up more people, develop them further so that they can reincarnate less. I think that's really why I'm here. I think my ability to heal people is more like the doorway. It's more like a window to then having these conversations. Really, that's really what I think it is. I also think really great health leads inevitably into better development, because once you start having great health, you evaluate yourself a lot more. You say, gosh, I feel so great now. And, you look back and you're like, God, I was such a negative person all the time. right? You're constantly using negative words, negative thoughts, negative actions, always carrying a chip on the shoulder, right? But once you have great health, you start coming out of that naturally, and you're saying, God, I don't know why I was like that, right? I think most of us should shoot to be in this higher category. I think that's the real goal. And you can always, like, in your head, you can think about human beings who were on this planet who achieved that. Jesus, Buddha, right? There's a lot of people we can look up to who achieved that level of that category of everyday living, thinking, breathing, trying to always strive to be the highest possible version of yourself. That's where we need to go instead of just New Year's resolutions. Every day, and I know this is a burden, but that's what life is, guys. Not in a negative way, but life is a challenge. Life is not a easy peasy thing. You're not just going to skirt through life most times. Some people do because they probably needed a lifetime incarnation that was a little easier because they probably just finished a lifetime that was ridiculously hard. So if you see someone in your life who's just skirting by and it's super easy for them, no traumas, no difficulties, everything's smooth, just know that they're probably just collecting dividends from living an incredibly crappy life not that long ago that you would not be jealous of. Okay, so don't be jealous of those people. Okay, they're probably just cashing in on some dividends for actually suffering quite badly in a previous lifetime. But in terms of focusing on ourselves, because this is what we should really be doing, people need to focus a lot more on themselves and worry a heck of a lot less about everybody else. That's the number one sin of humanity, constantly worrying about everybody else and not just focusing in on yourself. So every day we get up and we live and we breathe, we need to evaluate all of our thoughts. We need to evaluate all of our actions. And we need to say, how do we improve? How do we get better? How do I become a better person to be around? Right? If health really is your biggest thing, how do I improve my health every day? What do I got to do? Do I need to take a look at my diet? Do I need to take a look at how I exercise? Do I need to look at my mental health care? Something that most people aren't doing at all, right? Most people, in terms of like mental health care, they're just taking drugs, taking a Xanax, big beer at the end of the day, right? I love beer. I got Truly right now in my hand right now. It's just to sip on, right? But I'm not drinking this Truly to suppress deep emotional stress, right? I'm just doing this because I enjoy it. That's a difference. A lot of people are doing those things to suppress, right? If they have a really tough job, right? Boom. Every day after work, got to hit the bar, got to get alcohol, got to do this. Okay, we got to develop ourselves further. We got to be able to handle being human within ourselves, right from within. Meditation, whatever you have, whatever is going to work for you. We have to develop ourselves further because that's how you get out of the loop of reincarnation in this life, is by doing exactly that. That's how you break the loop. You break the loop by self-development. And once you achieve a high enough level of self-development through enough lifetimes and hard work, you no longer have to reincarnate here. And you can start developing further on the other side in a whole different situation, right? So I know that's a kind of a trippy thought. I know it's strange, but I'm telling you, I have full confidence that that's how this really goes. So I think that's a perfect place to leave this episode. I don't even know what I'm going to name this episode. I think it was just a lot of thoughts that just kind of, I let the thoughts free flow today, guys. What am I going to say? I let them come, and we're just going to see where that leads to. So make sure you like and subscribe to our channels everywhere. YouTube and Facebook, it's at Springback Chiro. We're on Spotify for the Unruly Doctor, so go to Spotify, search the Unruly Doctor, hit the like button with the bell, because that'll give you the reminder every time we get a new post. We're also on TikTok at the Unruly Doctor, so those are just little shorts and things like that, but that's just a way to reach more people. So, and once again, at the end of January, I'm doing a women's conference, so if you're actually interested about watching me speak in person about myself and self-development and health, make sure you give me an email or something at info@springbackchiro.com. Awesome, guys. Have a great new year.